Thanks for joining me for video 3. We're looking at evil in our time. And we've already looked at the fall of Satan and his followers. And now we're looking at the fall of mankind itself. Now we need to start with understanding that Satan could have just killed the man and the woman and had the creation all to himself, him and his angels. I think that probably God would not have gone for that God would have simply created more, brought the dust back together, breathed into it, and had mankind again. And that Satan has always seemed to be constrained to a certain set of rules. We read in Job where he's coming before God to tempt, to test, and all the time basically fulfilling the will of God, whether he likes it or not. And we see that God uses people like the Babylonians, the Persians, to accomplish his will. And it's no different today. God will use the Muslims, God will use the atheists according to his will to serve his own purposes. So people, even though they reject God and rebel against God, find themselves in God's purposes regardless. That's how vast God is. And Satan is no different. Even though he hates and despises mankind dearly, he's probably quite limited in the things he can do. And one thing it's evident he can do is to deceive man and woman into eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now God said, in the day that you eat this fruit, you will die. And that's exactly what Satan wants. I want them to die, therefore I'll lead them to the tree. I can't kill them outright, but I can lead them to death this way. So Satan takes the very most destructive path permitted to him, and he leads them to the tree. Eve has already sinned before the fruit touches her lips. The second that she decides in her heart that she's going to disobey God and eat of the fruit, she has stepped outside of God's will. She has committed a sin, which is a step which advances evil. She has advanced evil, just in the understanding that the will that she would eat the fruit. Now when she eats the fruit, there probably is something in the fruit as well, containing the knowledge of good and evil. She's already sinned, she's already broken God's law, and has fallen from grace. But at the same time, the fruit contains this knowledge that she was not supposed to have, this knowledge of good and evil. Now, the knowledge of good and evil can also be called the human moral law that has been seen common throughout all cultures, throughout all time. A university professor in California recently completed an online survey showing that in different moral situations, people, regardless of religion, age, gender, culture, upbringing, always respond the same way. And it proves that there is a universal moral law. We all understand what good is very clearly. And I just found that so fascinating. He wanted to show that this law, this universal moral law, was also in apes, in the simian species, and that could tie us in together with the apes. Now, when he tried to do this, his science was so sloppy that he received a bunch of infractions. He went up on charges for misconstruing evidence, and he was completely discredited. So when he tried to connect apes with men, he got into a lot of trouble. But he had no trouble proving the universal moral law exists. And I thank this atheist professor for that. It's something we all knew all along anyways, but now we have scientific evidence to show very clearly and definitively that yes, there is a universal moral law, which we also can call the knowledge of good and evil, as acquired by Eve in the garden. Now Eve ate the fruit and acquired the moral law within her. She could have reacted many different ways. She could have withdrawn from Adam for fear she would corrupt him. Her eyes were opened. She knew that she'd sinned against God and him alone. She could have gone to her father. When my daughters hurt themselves, they run to dad. They need dad to make it better. And this is what God must have surely expected from her. But she doesn't. She doesn't go to her father. She doesn't hide from man for fear of corrupting him as well. In fact, she is behaving in a way we can readily identify with today. She is very much the person we are today. She grabs hold of man. I'm not going down alone. And pulls him in as well. Now, I realize in our culture we want to assume that man was right there sinning at the same time so that woman doesn't have to bear any additional shame for this. And it's just a misconception. It's a cultural bit of stupidity we're trying to attach to the event. Whether or not man was first or woman was first to sin is irrelevant. Man had sinned, and man was reaching out to man saying, "You're coming with me," and pulling man together. It's not a gender issue, it's a sin issue. And we muddy the waters every time we try and bring these stupid little things into the argument. So it was a sin issue, and man said to man, "Come with me," and pulled man into sin. And together, they stepped outside of God's will, broke God's law, and Adam did the very same thing as Eve. He chose to take the fruit against God's will. So this new fallen creature doesn't run to God looking for help, but rather hides from God. You see, with the knowledge of good and evil, they understand that they have broken God's law. They have changed the relationship. Now, they could have held fig leaves over their genitals and come to God and saying, "Lord, we're naked, but maybe if you give us some clothes, we'll be okay." They didn't. They hid from God because they feared God. Now, the relationship with God was forever changed. And the sin was a barrier between man and God. Now, this is a good spot to end this video. We've seen that evil has advanced to mankind from Satan. And in the next video, we're going to see the advance of evil like lightning. It's shocking how quickly evil advances through mankind up to the point where God is so frustrated, so angry at the spread of evil that he's ready to just destroy everything. And this is such a significant look at the nature of God.